Thank you, Ash. It's fantastic. 110 beats per minute. Is that doing that one 110 times in a minute? It's too fast, isn't it? I think I misinterpreted something. Don't worry. We have a guest speaker now, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic. Helena Popovic. Dr. Helena Popovic is a medical doctor, a leading authority on how to improve brain function. All right, I need help. This is good. She's an international speaker and best-selling author. She graduated from the University of Sydney, and her philosophy is that education is more powerful than medication. Helena is the author of 2 best-selling books. Her first book is In Search of My Father, Dementia is No Match for a Daughter's Determination. Her second book is Neuroslimming, Let Your Brain Change Your Body. And it works. For Dr. Helena, promoting vibrant physical and mental health is not just her profession, it is her passion, her purpose and her personal way of life. She believes in slow aging despite fast living. Please welcome Dr. Helena. Hello, doctor. Come on up.
Wow! I feel good. I knew that I would stop. I feel good.
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to this really important event. I just have a quick question to start with. Who here uses dental floss? No pressure. Terrific. Well, you're about to discover mental floss. How to clean the plaque from between your neurons, and it works like this. Watch very carefully. Because neuroscientists have discovered that we can dramatically improve our brain function at any age or stage of life, and we can also significantly reduce our risk of dementia. And everything I say to you this morning comes from 2 contexts: from my professional life as a medical doctor, and also from my personal life of caring for my now 87-year-old father, who was diagnosed with dementia 12 years ago. And he's taught me more than anyone else that it's never too late to make a positive difference. At the age of 80, I bought him his first ever gym membership. I did not buy him the silver tracksuit. I have no idea where that came from. But by going to the gym, he's actually gained muscle mass. This is from the age of 80 onwards. Gained muscle mass, increased his strength, and improved his fitness. And studies have actually shown that throughout our lives, even into our 90s, we can continue to build muscle, and equally so, we can continue to build brain. And the key is to have fun while you're doing it. Now, we've always known that a healthy body means a healthy mind, but the reverse is equally true. A healthy mind creates a healthy body, because the human brain constitutes less than 2% of our body weight, yet it uses 20% of our blood supply, 20% of our energy, and it generates around 20% of our heat. Now, what that means in practical terms is that 1/5 of all the nutrients you took in at breakfast this morning, 1/5 of the nutrients were soaked up by your brain to be used as essential raw materials. 1/5 of any junk you eat, which clearly if you're associated with St John's Ambulance you wouldn't, but hypothetically speaking, 1/5 of any junk we eat goes to the brain to jam its mental machinery, to actually slow down our cognitive processes. And 1/5 of all the calories we consume also go to our brain to keep our cognitive wheels turning, because we underestimate just how many calories thinking, planning and decision-making take. So if you want to shed a few kilos, do some deep thinking. It will burn through those calories. So the first thing to note about the brain is that it consumes a disproportionate amount of our resources, and that's something that we influence on a daily basis. Now, to kick things off, please turn to the person sitting next to you and give them your best smile. Lovely. Now, every time you hear this tambourine, it means wrap up what you're doing and turn your attention back to me. If you don't wrap up what you're doing, I'll have to subject you to the mating call of the yellow-spotted Tasmanian wood duck. Trust me, this fine establishment doesn't want me to subject you to the mating call of the yellow-spotted Tasmanian wood duck. So, when you were smiling at each other, did you happen to notice who raised their eyebrows when they smiled? Why I ask, interesting research found that if you raise your eyebrows when you smile, the other person will think you look more intelligent than if you hadn't raised your eyebrows. But even without the eyebrow raising, whenever we smile, other people rate us as looking younger, smarter and hotter. So now that everyone in the room thinks everyone else in the room looks young and attractive, please give each other a genuine, heartfelt compliment. And if you're sitting there thinking, but the person next to me doesn't know me, don't worry, something pleasant about you has struck them or they wouldn't be sitting next to you. So 10 seconds each, just give each other a compliment. One compliment will do. Now, what was that all about? Why did I ask you to give each other a compliment? Because the second thing to note about the brain is that it loves suspense. Suspense has the effect of giving our brain cells a shake and saying, wake up, something really exciting is about to happen. So I'm not going to tell you why you did that until later. In order to keep your brain cells in suspense and on alert for the answer, and therefore paying full attention to everything I'm saying, which I know you would anyway, because I have the most amazing news. In the last 2 decades, neuroscientists have discovered more about how the human brain works than in all the centuries of brain research that's gone on in human history, which means our knowledge of the brain has absolutely exploded, and the information is life-changing. In fact, you're about to learn, who would have thought on this seemingly ordinary Friday morning, you would learn the most profound, pivotal, exciting, significant, crucial, critical, colossal, consequential, monumental, momentous, mind-blowing, awe-inspiring, enabling, empowering, and far-reaching scientific discovery in the history of the human race. That's no exaggeration. Because that discovery is that the brain, your brain, my brain, our brain, that 1.4 kilogram wrinkled lump of grey matter can actually change its very own structure with each different activity it performs. Now just stop and think about that for a moment. You've probably heard the term, the brain can change, but what does that actually mean? It means that the brain can grow new cells. The brain can make new connections between existing cells. The brain can establish whole new circuits. It can even change which cells perform which functions. And this has revolutionised things like stroke treatment. We used to think that if somebody had a stroke and, say, paralysed part of their body, if they didn't get better after a few months of rehab, they probably never would. We've now discovered that with specific intense therapy known as CIT, that stands for constraint-induced therapy, cells from undamaged parts of the brain can actually reorganise themselves, send out new nerve fibres so that the person can start to use their paralysed limb. And the way it works is this: they will actually strap up the good side, so they're not allowed to use the arm that still works. And they might put a glass of water a few millimetres in front of the fingertips of the paralysed hand, and they'll say, now you try and touch that glass. And the person will go, I can't, it's paralysed. And they'll say, it's only a few millimetres, focus, try, just put all your attention on it and try and touch the glass. And so they do. And when they touch the glass, they move it away another few millimetres and they try again. And so day in, day out, over a period of months, they keep repeating this practice until 3 months later they will rescan their brain, and not only have they actually resumed using this arm, but they've seen a reorganisation in the brain. So previously areas of the brain that weren't involved in hand function have now been recruited. And we call this remarkable ability of the brain to change itself neuroplasticity. Can I have a show of hands how many of you have come across that term before? Terrific. Well, neuroplasticity, let's say that again. Neuroplasticity comes from 2 words. Neuron meaning brain cell, and plastic meaning malleable or able to be moulded. And really what neuroplasticity means is that every single one of us influences how our own brain operates and develops throughout our entire life. Now this actually flies in the face of what we've believed for most of human history. How many of you have heard, and this is actually what I was taught in medical school nearly 30 years ago, and I know, looking at me, you're probably thinking 3 years ago, but it's been 30. I was taught that the brain is the only organ that can't regenerate or repair itself. I mean, have you heard that if you have that alcohol binge and destroy brain cells, you'll never get them back? Well, I'm not here to encourage the alcohol binge. However, we continue to make new brain cells throughout our lives, and we've estimated that it's about 5,000 new brain cells every day, when we're young, when we're old, and every age in between. But the critical factor is this: It's our day-to-day choices, lifestyles and habits that determine how well those brain cells function. Now, why is this so critically important? Because the brain runs the show of our lives. And yes, I know every so often you meet someone in whom you really doubt that, but really, if we can boost our brain, we can boost every aspect of our lives. We can think better, learn better, create better, relate better, and achieve far more than we ever thought possible. And we can also go a long way to reducing our risk of dementia, including Alzheimer's disease. Now, I had a question outside. A lady said, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? Dementia is an umbrella term that covers about 100 different disorders, all of which affect the brain and all of which lead to progressive cognitive decline. So to say someone has dementia is a little bit like saying somebody has cancer. The next question is, what type of cancer? What type of dementia? And the most common type of dementia in Australia is Alzheimer's disease. It accounts for 60 to 70% of cases. That's why we hear the most about it. That's why there is an Alzheimer's Society, because it covers nearly 70% of all cases of dementia. The second most common type is vascular dementia, which, as the name suggests, is due to damage to small blood vessels in the brain. And perhaps about 30% of people who have a stroke will go on to develop dementia if they don't do some active brain training. And the symptoms of dementias can be wide and varied, but most of them are short-term memory loss, perhaps personality changes, apathy, loss of interest in things. Now, we used to think that most dementias were either genetic or bad luck. We now know that most dementias, not all, are not hereditary and are as much a lifestyle-based disease as is heart disease, type 2 diabetes and obesity. And this is actually great news because it's very empowering. It means that we can go a long way to keeping our brain in top shape throughout our lives. And it starts by understanding that the brain behaves like a muscle. The more actively we engage our brains, the more different ways we use our brains, the bigger, the more complex, and the more effective they can become. Now, here's something fascinating. The brains of wild animals are 15 to 30% larger than the brains of their tame domestic counterparts. Why? What is it about being wild that boosts their brains? And does it apply to humans? Probably not in that case. But neuroscientists have actually discovered a lot about the human brain by observing the behaviour of animals in the wild. And what they've come up with is basically we can learn to perform at our peak on a daily basis, we can tap into brain potential we never knew we had, and we can stay as sharp at age 90 as we were at age 30. And it's not just a few genetically lucky individuals, there are plenty of examples of this. Who's heard of, hands up, architect Frank Lloyd Wright? Terrific. Well, he designed the Guggenheim Museum in New York, among other things. He was 90 years old when he designed the Guggenheim. Benjamin Franklin invented bifocal glasses at the age of 78. Eleanor Benz was a Chicago woman. She grew up during the Depression and she had to leave school very young to help her family. When she was 90, she thought, I want to go back to school. So she went back to school when she was 90. She attained her diploma and she had 37 great-grandchildren to cheer her on. And Julia Britton, at age 97, was still a highly successful Australian playwright and had 3 plays produced in January 2009. Hands up who here has had 3 plays produced. Terrific. Then that's something you have to look forward to because that level of mental functioning is available to all of us. How? By following 20 fundamental brain-boosting principles. Just like Tony Ahern said this morning, it takes a system to save a life. It also takes a system to save a brain. That's why 20 brain-boosting principles. Now, I know you're only supposed to give people 5 take-home messages, but this is St John's Ambulance. You will thrive on 20. So let's get started. Principle number 1 is actually the most important, so I will spend the longest amount of time on it. The first principle is get an attitude. What does that mean? Neuroscientists asked an interesting question. Is there an attitude, a prevailing way of thinking that actually boosts brain function? And they discovered that there was. And it was to have a can-do attitude. So what they did was they asked people to cut that 4-letter word out of their vocabulary. And that word, of course, is can't, C-A-N'-T, because the word can't chokes our brains. It's like putting the brain in a straitjacket or giving the brain a restraining order. Now, I know this sounds really simplistic because we tell our children There's no such thing as can't when they don't want to do something. But the fact is, the human brain is very sensitive and responsive to language. So everything we say to ourselves, whether it's out loud or even silently inside our own heads, has the effect of giving our brain cells a set of instructions. Because we don't see with our eyes, we see with our brains. We see through the filter of everything else that's going on in our lives. We see throughout the filter of our beliefs, our expectations, and our self-talk. So if I predetermine that I can't do something, I literally close off my ability to see how it can be done. I won't even notice when an opportunity presents itself that would help me solve the problem. And you might have experienced this with somebody. You walk into a room and somebody's flustered and says, I just can't find that document. I've just lost that document. It's nowhere. And you go, calm down. Tell me what the document looked like. It's in a blue folder. Do you mean that blue folder over there? How did you find it and I didn't? Because once we believe something's not possible or we can't do something, we create a state of mind blindness. And it isn't only the word can't, it's all those euphemisms we have for can't. It's impossible. It's all too hard. I'm too old for this. Be careful what you think, because your brain will soak up on the words and deliver on them. And my father used to tell me a story that illustrated this when I was growing up. He came from Serbia and he used to spend time on his grandfather's farm. And one day a delivery of chickens arrived at their door. The family was not home, they were all out at the markets, so they just left them in a flimsy old crate. And by the time the family got home, all the chickens had escaped, not a feather left. So they spent the whole afternoon racing around town looking for these chickens. And his grandfather was not happy, so he rings the chicken supplier and he says, listen mate, or whatever the Serbian equivalent of listen mate would have been. He says, don't do something so irresponsible again. How could you leave livestock at our front door? All the chickens have escaped. We've wasted the whole afternoon looking for them and we've only managed to retrieve 11 of them. And the chicken supplier said, well, that's not too bad because we only delivered 6. So if you drop your preconceived ideas about the limits of what's possible, you'll find you can achieve so much more. And I even had a personal experience of this climbing Mount Kinabalu in Malaysian Borneo. Has anyone climbed Mount Kinabalu? Fantastic, a few of you. For those who haven't, Mount Kinabalu is more than 4,000 metres high, takes at least 2 days to climb, and you have to go up with a guide. The Malaysian authorities, for good reason, won't let you go up by yourself. I don't know if this was your experience, but I'll spare you the altitude sickness, the frostbitten fingers, and the screaming thighs. But suffice to say, I did eventually make it. And it's the most exhilarating feeling in the world. You're sitting right on top of this pointy mountain. You're actually above the clouds and you're looking down on the world. And as I was there, I noticed a group of climbers a fair way down, tackling a ridiculously steep looking slope. It looked almost 90 degrees. Maybe it was you. And I turned to my guide and I said, do they have a death wish or are they mad? I said, thank goodness you never took me up that way because I never would have made it. And he turned to me and he said, but I did take you up that way. You just didn't realise how steep it was because you were on it. And I thought, what a lesson to learn. If you'd have flown me up the day before and said, you're climbing that, I would have pulled out, I would have said, I can't do that. Never think you can't do something just because it looks hard. Take the first step and you'll be amazed at how far you can get. And I brought this principle home because my father's favourite word of all was, I can't. I can't do that, I'm too old. I can't hang up the washing, I'm too old. I can't wash the dishes, your mother never asked me to wash the dishes. Well, things were going to change. So I had an idea and I came to the kitchen table and I put down a big glass jar. And I labelled it can-do jar. And Dad immediately said, don't you mean candy jar? I said, no, this is our can-do jar. From now on, if anyone says the word can't, they have to put a gold coin in the jar. And since I don't say it and you say it all the time, when that jar gets full of your money, I get to spend your money. And I wasn't sure if this was going to work because he has profound short-term memory loss. And usually within a few minutes, he's actually forgotten what I've told him. But I have done a lot of exercises to boost his memory, and I've discovered the #1 memory booster. Do you know what it is? Money, exactly. You'll be amazed at how that man's language is cleaned up. And I know it's the visual prompt. He sees the jar and that's what triggers the memory, so he stops himself short. But here's the thing, because he won't say the word can't, means he has to go and try the thing and he surprises himself that he actually can. And I'll just give you an example. I've been doing jigsaw puzzles with him to try and stimulate just a bit of brain function and focus, and oh, no, he never could do that, but made him persist. And he started with 50 pieces and was struggling. He's now up to 500 pieces with help. And the other day he came into me really excited and he said, guess what? I finished that last jigsaw puzzle all by myself and it took me less than 2 hours. And on the side of the box, it says 4 to 5 years. So I actually recommend that every organisation, every classroom, every household has a can-do jar as a visual reminder of the power of our language. Now, I can see some of you looking at me quizzically thinking, that's all very well, but it leaves a vacuum in my vocabulary. What am I supposed to say during those frustrating moments when things aren't going to plan? Excellent question. Brings us to brain booster number 2, to get curious. Albert Einstein said, I have no special talents. I'm only passionately curious. Curiosity actually keeps our brains sharp and active and alive. And curiosity puts demands on the brain to get creative and to find solutions. So how to use that concept from now on, whenever you feel like saying, I can't do something, swap the word can't for the word how and ask the question, how can I do this? So instead of saying, I can't find time to exercise, how can I find time to exercise? I can't get the kids to eat vegetables. How can I get the kids to eat vegetables? Neuroscientists call this shifting linguistic categories. And what it does, when we go from a statement to a question, it actually activates different regions of the brain. It actually makes us more creative and innovative, and it actually draws on past experiences and resources, recruits everything we need to try and find the solution. Now, you don't have to walk around and try and find the solution yourself. By asking the question, you'll find you might be reading the newspaper and something you read will trigger the answer for you. Or you're speaking to somebody and something they say in conversation is like, oh, that's the answer. And that's because you've changed your focus from problem to solution. They've actually done studies on this where they get a room full of people like this and they give them all the same set of 10 problems to solve. And half the room is told to write down 20 times before they start, I will solve this, I will solve this, I will solve this. And the other half of the room is asked to write down 20 times, how will I solve this? Or how can I solve this? Whatever feels natural to them. And then they get them to solve the problems and see if there's any difference in the average number, correct, and the speed at which they do it. Every time they do it, one half of the room outperforms the other. Which do you think it is? The how group. This is traditional positive thinking doesn't work unless you already believe that you can do something. But asking a question of yourself actually stimulates more activity in your brain and you're more likely to find the solution. So this is such an important concept. I invite you to turn to the person sitting next to you again. If they gave you a dud compliment before, turn to the person on your other side. And share with them something in your life that you've wanted to do or achieve, but you found yourself saying or thinking, I can't, or it's all too hard, or I'm too old for this. And just share with that person what's that thing that you've been putting yourself down about, and just make a commitment that you'll change your language and ask a how question. Take a minute just to share that. By all means, continue that conversation at lunch, and at next year's conference, hunt that person down and check on their progress. If they've changed their language, they will have changed their life. Remember the words of Michelangelo. The greatest risk a person can take is not to aim too high and miss, but to aim too low and hit. So aim high, ask how, and your brain will find a way to get you there. So from now on, you can drink to your health, but no more than that. Brain booster number 3. Men who consume more than 14 alcoholic drinks a week And women who consume more than 10 alcoholic drinks a week have considerably smaller brain volumes. And there is a dose-dependent effect. The more you drink, the more you shrink. Now for women, one standard drink, by the way, is 10 grams of alcohol, which is 100 mils of wine. So it's easy to remember a weekly quota for a woman is a 1 litre bottle of wine, and for a man is about 1.5 litres, but definitely no more for the week. For women too, more than that actually significantly increases the risk of breast cancer by about 24%. And in fact, 1 in 7 breast cancers in Australia are due to excessive alcohol consumption. That's so many breast cancers we could do without. And it just means reducing alcohol. And I'm not saying we have to be teetotalers. It's just about keeping it to safe limits. 14 for men, 10 for women, and whatever you do, don't save all 10 for the one night. Spread it out over the week, or you'll feel like this. Because binge drinking really is the worst thing we can do for our health. Studies have also found that we perform better at anything that requires sharp mental acuity if we abstain from alcohol for 24 hours prior to the event. So next time you've had a really hard day and just want to collapse on the couch with a glass of wine, crack open a handful of walnuts instead. Why walnuts? They're a brain food. They look like brains, don't they? But they're actually a rich source of omega-3 fatty acids, which are essential for optimal brain and heart function. Omega-3 fatty acids have anti-inflammatory properties, and we now know that most diseases are due to an underlying inflammation, including Alzheimer's disease. And the brain is about 60% fat. So if I may borrow from the words of George Bernard Shaw, no diet will ever remove all the fat from your body. Without a brain, you might look good, but all you could do is stand for public office. No offence intended. Actually, that reminds me, the College of Neurologists has actually made some changes to the mini mental state exam to test for short-term memory. They will no longer be asking who is the Prime Minister of Australia, because it's deemed an unfair question. As for general dietary advice, oh, by the way, what are other sources of omega-3s? If you don't eat walnuts, no need to panic. There are plenty of other sources, namely linseeds, chia seeds, flaxseed oil, soybeans, dark leafy greens, and particularly your cold water deep sea fish, your salmon, sardines, mackerel, tuna. So you'll be excited to know I have asked the organisers of this event to serve you sardine and spinach sandwiches on soy linseed bread for lunch. Fabulous brain food. Actually, salmon, wild-caught salmon is actually the richest source of omega-3 fatty acids. As for general dietary advice, think colourful. Put as many different coloured fruits and vegetables on your plate at every meal, because each different colour tends to represent a different nutrient, and we need all of them. And by fruit and colourful, I do not mean Fruit Loops. Because one of the most toxic things for the brain is actually refined sugar. I know there's this massive sugar debate about, we all know that it's not good for our health, but it's absolutely toxic to the brain when we eat excessive refined sugar, and I'll define that in a moment. Because what we've found is that sugar actually has a very similar effect on the brain and on the liver that alcohol does. So sugar really is the new booze, and I'd like you to think about it like alcohol. You know, there's safe limits of alcohol consumption and there's safe limits of sugar consumption. And if we exceed them, we will get fatty liver disease that is indistinguishable from alcoholic liver disease. We will get gout because of the buildup of toxins like uric acid. When the liver has to deal with too much fructose, because the sugar molecule is half glucose, half fructose, and they both of those sugar molecules contribute to diabetes. Glucose because of its effect on insulin, and fructose because of its effect on the liver, causing inflammation, and byproducts such as uric acid, which cause gout and high blood pressure. So all of that put together makes sugar a toxin. But specifically in relation to the brain, the fructose molecule actually changes gene expression in the hippocampus and the hypothalamus, both of which are really essential for clarity of thinking, building memories, and organising our lives. And it also damages signalling between brain cells and contributes to the build-up of toxic chemicals in the brain. So there is really a direct effect. And here's the problem. Today, by the time a child in a developed country is 7 years old, 8 years old, they've had more sugar than the average person had in their entire life a century ago. That's the problem, volume. And they've actually done studies to find that kids who have sugary breakfast cereals or drink sugary juices for breakfast, their cognition by mid-morning is that of a 70-year-old. It really significantly affects it. So the World Health Organization has actually put out a safe level of sugar consumption, and that is, for a child under the age of 2, 0 added sugar. Now, when I'm talking sugar, I'm not talking apples, bananas, pumpkins, carrots. I'm not talking the whole food. It's only the sugar that you find in packaged foods, breakfast cereals, muesli bars, flavoured yogurts, tomato sauce, baked beans, packet soups, teriyaki sauce, things that we wouldn't even necessarily associate with sugar. You'll have to learn to read the labels and see whether there's sugar in it and how much is in it. So children under 2, no added sugar. Children up to the age of 12, no more than 4 teaspoons of sugar a day. Women no more than 6 teaspoons a day, and men no more than 9. I actually think that's generous, but given that the average Australian adult male will consume 20 to 40 teaspoons of sugar a day without even realising, a lot of that in the form of soft drinks, 9 is a good target. Now, the problem is the labels don't tell you how many teaspoons of sugar in a product, the labels tell you how many grams. So simple maths, 1 teaspoon of sugar is 4.2 grams. So roughly, when you read the back of a pack, divide the number of grams of sugar by 4 and you'll get the number of teaspoons. And I'm going to give you a little quiz which might shock you. Where is it? Here we go. On the flight here, the airline handed me out a packet of dried craisins, dried cranberries. Now, once you adulterate something, I said fruit and vegetable were fine, but once you remove the water and you dry it, concentrated sugar, or once you juice it and remove the fibre, concentrated sugar. So then it counts towards your sugar quota. How many teaspoons of sugar, when I did the maths on the back of this, how many teaspoons of sugar in this tiny little 32-gram packet of craisins? 6. That's my daily quote. If I'd have eaten this, that would have been it. No more sugar for the day. So I'm just warning you, there's sugar everywhere that we don't even realise. And the other thing to note about is fructose particularly is a master of disguise. There are, and what I mean by that is there are more than 60 different words for sugar on food labels deliberately so that you don't even recognise their sugar. And 46 of them contain fructose, which is the more toxic molecule out of glucose and fructose. But you've got to be careful of both. So I have a question for you. Do you think it's possible for a person to rattle off all 60 different names of sugar by rote in 60 seconds? All right. I'm up for the challenge. Are we ready for them? See how many of these words for sugar you recognise and would have thought were healthy and didn't matter. Number 1, agave nectar. It's just sugar. Barbados sugar, beet sugar, brown sugar, coconut sugar, cane sugar, confectioner's sugar, crystallised sugar, date sugar, demerara sugar, golden sugar, grape sugar, granulated sugar, icing sugar, invert sugar, muscovado sugar, organic sugar, palm sugar, raw organic sugar, superfine sugar, table sugar, turbinado sugar, yellow sugar. We're not even halfway there yet. Then you've got your syrups, buttered syrup, carob syrup, high fructose corn syrup, golden syrup, maple syrup, refiner's syrup, sorghum syrup. Then you've got your oses, fructose, crystallised fructose, sucrose, saccharose. Then you've got your other stuff, honey, it counts. I use honey medicinally, but it still counts towards your 4, 6, 9 teaspoons of sugar a day. So you've got honey, caramel, treacle, pinoca, Florida crystals, blackstrap molasses, ordinary molasses. And then you've got your juices that are in things like your fruit juice, your concentrated fruit juice, your evaporated cane juice crystals, or just cane juice. They are 46 words for fructose alone. I won't bore you with the ones for glucose, but anything with barley malt, glucose, diastase, diastatic malt, ethyl maltol, that's all glucose, and all of that counts towards our sugar quota. Does anyone here struggle to fall asleep? Forget counting sheep, count sugar instead. Okay, so really the sugar industry tries to hide the sugar, and it's our job to try and seek it out. Final note about sugar is that soft drinks are the new cigarettes. There is nothing more damaging to our health than soft drinks, and there is no safe level of soft drink consumption. People used to say, but it's different. With smoking, there's passive smoking and it doesn't affect other people. Drinking a soft drink does affect other people because we see other people doing it and we think it's okay. Why are they so bad? if you changed nothing in your life, but you left here and from now on, you added one 375ml can of soft drink to your diet, you still ate the same food and you still did the same level of exercise, 1 can of soft drink a day will lead to approximately 7 kilograms extra body fat per year and will increase your risk of diabetes by about 22%. 1 can of soft drink. That's how toxic they are. And as I said, kids and other people look around and go, well, you know, it can't be that bad, everyone's doing it. Now, I don't want to put the soft drink industry out of business. I just think they need to rebrand. Move all your soft drinks to the laundry because they make really excellent cleaning agents. And I think I need to mention juices because they are the new pseudo-healthy thing. To juice or not to juice, what happens when we juice? We remove all the fibre, which means we get a whole lot more sugar. Like, how many apples would you eat in one sitting? 1, maybe 2. How many apples go into a small juice? Minimum 4. So you're getting the sugar of 4 apples concentrated, and it's too much of a load for your liver to process effectively without building up uric acid and other toxic byproducts. So, one final point about health. So get off refined sugar and get off vegetable oils. Now, first point is there is actually no such thing as a vegetable oil. There are only fruit oils, nut oils and seed oils. Fruit oils are olive oil. Olive is a fruit. Smashed avocado oil and coconut oil. They're actually fruit oils and they get a big tick because they're either high in monounsaturated fatty acids or high in saturated fats. And yes, I've said the word, saturated fats are healthy. The research is now indisputable. There's nothing wrong with saturated fat. Yay, we can eat our pork crackling. We can keep the fat on our lamb and our meat. It does not lead to an increased risk of heart disease. What increases your triglyceride levels and your small dense LDL? It's not saturated fat, it's not cholesterol, but it's carbohydrates and sugars. The number one thing that will increase your risk of heart disease and unhealthy blood fats is sugar, not saturated fat. So that's the fruit oils. Then I said the nut oils, your macadamia nut oil, fantastic oil, but very expensive. Walnut oil in moderation. The really unhealthy oils are the things that call themselves vegetable oils but are not. They are all hydrogenated seed oils. If you want to improve your health, do not use either raw or in cooking soybean oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, corn oil, rice bran oil. I know, I remember when my mother switched, you know, from using lard and duck fat and those kind of things to rice bran oil because we were told that's healthy. They're not healthy, and the reason is those oils are highly pro-inflammatory. They're high in omega-6 fatty acids, and we're eating too many omega-6 fatty acids in comparison to omega-3 fatty acids. And they are causing widespread inflammation throughout the body and increasing our risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke and dementia. If you want to know more, come and talk to me because it's a whole other subject, and for a lot of you it might be, what? Oh, butter's fine too, so get rid of the margarine and swap it for the butter. The only exception is the high oleic sunflower oil because it's shifted the ratio, there's fewer omega-6 fatty acids. Just for my own interest, for how many of you has this information on vegetable oils been a shock, a surprise? Okay, about half the room, which is what I usually find. So it's all good, saturated fats are healthy. And in fact, research has found that women who carry excess body fat are actually healthier than men who mention it to them. Okay. All right, another question for you. Who here regularly exercises of a morning? Terrific. So the rest of you obviously exercise in the evening. That's fine too. The major point here, our next brain booster, is to get moving because the brain operates at its absolute best in that first hour after we engage in any sort of physical exercise. So anything, it could be running, swimming, brisk walking, cycling, dancing, jumping up and down to your favourite piece of music. Any kind of movement for just 20 minutes will significantly improve your brain function in the few hours that follow. So try this before IKEA furniture assembly. It'll be a whole lot easier. Now, why is exercise so powerful in terms of improving brain function? We've always known that exercise is good for the heart, But we've now discovered that when we exercise, we produce a chemical in the brain called BDNF. That stands for brain-derived neurotropic factor. And what this chemical does is it stimulates the growth of new brain cells and new connections between existing brain cells. So whenever we exercise, we are actually building brain cells, increasing our grey matter. Studies all over the world have found, in Germany they found that just 20 minutes on a treadmill boosted language learning by 20%. The Japanese found that 20 minutes on a bicycle improved creative thinking significantly over just resting or doing anything else beforehand. The other thing about exercise is that it is as powerful as Prozac in the treatment of depression. You need 1 hour a day, and you preferably mix it up with aerobic exercise and weight-bearing exercise. It is as powerful as any of the antidepressants. It's difficult to motivate depressed people to exercise, but if you can, that is a really important factor in their recovery. And I just had a personal experience of this. It only takes 10 minutes to actually lift your mood when you're exercising, even less if you do it more intensely. And a man came to me one day and he said, look, my wife has sent me here. She said it's Prozac or divorce. I said, what do you mean? He said, whenever I get home from work, I'm so stressed and angry, I literally kick the dog, I yell at the kids, I know I'm not human. Can you just prescribe something so I'm in a better mood when I arrive home? I said, I can, but it's not in a bottle. I said, from now on, when you arrive home, park the car, but don't enter the house until you've done at least a 10-minute brisk walk around the block. That's all it'll take to start to produce that cocktail of feel-good chemicals. That walk will deliver serotonin, endorphins, noradrenaline, dopamine. You'll feel a whole lot better. So he said, I can try that. He did. He said, I just felt so good after that 10 minutes. Sometimes I'd do 3 laps, so I'd get my daily dose in. Everyone in the house noticed the difference. But he never told anyone what he was doing. So what his wife saw was that he'd arrive home, park the car, disappear for half an hour, and come back flushed and in a good mood. Took a letter from his doctor to say he was walking, not womanising. That's the power of exercise. Now the best news I think about exercise lately is that, wait for this, 30 seconds of exercise, seconds, not minutes, will improve all your biochemistry, and particularly if you're diabetic, help regulate your blood sugar levels, especially if you do it just before a meal. 30 seconds. And what it means is just say fast running on the spot, or fast pedaling on a bicycle, or just get up a bit of sweat for 30 seconds, and after that meal, if you test your blood sugar, it doesn't spike as much as it would have otherwise, and it gets back to baseline much quicker. Amazing. And because I can see you looking at me so eagerly, and because we're going to go out to lunch soon, how about everybody stand up and try it? I'm going to count 30 seconds, and everyone just run as fast and hard on the spot as you can. Now, if you haven't exercised for a while, take it easy. Ready, steady, go. 30 seconds. It's going to feel like the longest 30 seconds of the day. Go hard. That's halfway. It is. Seconds to go. Wonderful. How much better do you feel? And that brings us to the next brain booster, just to get up out of your chair. Have you heard that sitting is the new smoking? Okay. People who sit for more than 11 hours a day. Now, I know that sounds unreasonable, but I have colleagues who have desk jobs, who drive an hour to work, sit at their desk for 8 to 9 hours, drive another hour home, bang, that's 10 or 11 hours, and then they're so tired because they've been sitting all day, they sit in front of the telly for another hour. Bang, that's 11 hours of sitting a day. They are at 40% increased risk of early death compared to people who sit for less than 4 hours a day. Those who sit for more than 8 hours a day are at 15% increased risk of early death. Why? Why is sitting so hazardous? Because when we sit, there's no movement and no electrical activity in our biggest muscles, which are our quads and our glutes. No electrical activity in those muscles means we don't clear the sugars and fats from our bloodstream, and we build up inflammation throughout our body. And it increases the risk of cancer, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes. So it's really important to get up regularly. The bad news is, even if you flog yourself at the gym for an hour a day, it doesn't counteract the negative effects of prolonged sitting. But the good news is, all you need to do is to stand up for 2 minutes every 20 to 30 minutes. Now, I've spoken to accountants and lawyers about this, and they break out into a cold sweat because every 6 minutes is a billable unit, and I'm losing 1 billable unit an hour. It doesn't have to be dead time. They're not called mobile phones for nothing. Just have an alarm that goes off, say, every half hour to trigger you to stand up. You can read, you can make a phone call, you can still write, you can still type. You can buy cheap $30 to $50 little stand-up desks. It will change your life. I mean, that alone. Just my diabetic patients, that's the first thing I tell them. Stand up every 30 minutes. Don't change your diet, don't do anything else. Just get into that habit. That alone helps regulate their blood sugar levels. And I think every workplace needs to have that poster. All right. The next, I know we've only got like a few minutes. I'm going to go over 5 minutes, I apologise, just to get the last few in. But they're like a little checklist because I think you probably know them. Have a laugh a day. Laughter has a very similar effect on the brain that physical exercise does. We produce that same cocktail of feel-good chemicals. Laughter also raises our pain threshold because of the production of endorphins. So if you're about to experience something painful, if you laugh first, it'll hurt less. This is really good if you're out in the field and somebody's in pain. If you make them laugh, it'll hurt less. My father could always make me laugh when I was growing up. I can remember when I was quite young, I was going through a very religious phase, and I was madly in love with this boy, and then I discovered that he was an atheist, and I was devastated. And I came and my dad said, "What's wrong, darling? I thought the two of you were in love." And I said, "We are, Dad, but I can't marry him now. He doesn't believe in heaven and hell." And my father said, "Darling, don't you worry. You go right ahead and marry him. He'll soon believe in hell." Thank you, Dad. Even just a smile a day changes our brain chemistry. We don't just smile when we're happy, we actually feel happier when we smile because smiling produces feel-good chemicals and changes the circuitry of our brains. They did a wonderful study, one of my favourites. Again, they got a group of people in a room like this, and they gave everybody the same newspaper to read. They also gave everybody a pen. And this half of the room were told, while you're reading, hold the pen between your lips like this. And the other half of the room were told, while you're reading the newspaper, hold the pen between your teeth like this. And then after 20 minutes, they said, take the pens out of your mouths, we're removing the newspapers, and write down everything you remember reading. So they did. When they looked at what the two groups had written, remember, everyone was reading the same newspaper. But these people had written more bad news, sad news stories, and these people had written significantly more feel-good, uplifting or neutral stories. Now, why would one half of the room have focused on negatives and the other on positives? Because this half of the room didn't realise they were smiling. And this half of the room didn't realise they had a sad face. So if you want to lift your mood, if somebody's just annoyed you or frustrated you, just pop a pen between your teeth. Dad always knows when I'm annoyed. I can also remember another time he made me smile. This time I had moved out of home for the first time to live with my boyfriend, and 3 weeks later we'd had our first big fight. So I rang home and I said, "Dad, he's being nasty to me. Can I move back home with you and Mum?" And my father was outraged. He said, "What? If that young man is being nasty to my little girl, I'm not going to let him get away with it. He deserves to be punished. You're not moving back home with us. I'm sending your mother to go and live with the two of you." You may have heard of a new disorder in the psychiatric textbooks. It's called NDD. Do you know what it stands for? Nature Deficit Disorder. Our brain, our body, our psyche, our soul needs nature. People who don't spend any time in nature or very little time in nature have a higher incidence of depression, stress and anxiety-related disorders. Nature is our great healer and balancer, because when we're in nature, if we're stressed, it's one of the best things to just relax us. And when we're tired, nature will actually energise us and help us improve concentration. If you're just not focusing, get out into nature. Also, if you ever find yourself in hospital, make sure you ask for a room with a view of nature, because hospital patients who look out onto nature, particularly after surgery, they need fewer painkillers, they heal more quickly, they get out of hospital quicker. Similarly, if you ever find yourself in prison, ask for a cell with a view of nature. Prisoners who look out onto nature, who spend more time in nature, get sick less often, are better behaved and get out of prison sooner. It is so very powerful. And while you're out there, make sure you get some sunshine. The sun is our best source of vitamin D, and low vitamin D levels are also associated with a high risk of dementia and poorer cognition. Now I didn't actually mention, but when I talked about exercise, I meant to say that just 30 minutes of exercise a day, and a brisk walk will halve our lifetime risk of dementia. There's a second thing that will halve our lifetime risk of dementia: lifelong active learning. Continuing to learn new things, new skills, more than passively watching a documentary. There's nothing wrong with watching a documentary, but it just doesn't stimulate our brains as much as learning a foreign language, a musical instrument, an art, a craft, a skill, a sport, a hands-on endeavour. All those things really feed our brains. Reading Shakespeare or complex literature. New carer had come to our house recently, and she just had said to me, "Oh, I've read your book." And Dad quickly piped up and he said, "I've just finished my first book too." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yes, and I'm about to start reading my second book." So anyway, reading, anything that's going to stimulate your brain cells. So let me give you a quick maths quiz. If Bob has 36 candy bars and he eats 29, what does he have now? Diabetes. Well done. Okay, we passed the maths. Okay, how about the spelling? I'd like you to all spell out loud the word silk. Very good. And what do cows drink? Oh, you're too sharp. Very good. This is St John's Ambulance, by the way. Well done. One last study I want to mention. They did a study comparing crossword puzzles, Sudoku, ping pong, and various other activities, and they found that one thing was better than everything else. By the way, crosswords and Sudoku puzzles are good for you as long as you're not good at them. Once you get good at something, the key is keep finding something new to challenge yourself. So, what do you think they found was one of the best things to boost brain function in terms of activities? You might want to do this at your next conference. It was learning to draw live nude models. And the reason for that, they did it at the University of Edinburgh. The reason for that was, firstly, it was learning a new skill. It was both mental activity and it was a physical activity. And also it was more physical exercise than they expected, because people would get up, walk around, see what was the best angle. And there was a lot of laughter, so there was that brain booster, and it was a social activity. So it incorporated a whole lot of different brain boosters. Now, if you haven't got time to learn something new, even just getting out of your comfort zone will boost your brain. By that I mean, take a normal daily habit, tweak it a bit, do it a bit differently. So when you wake up in the morning, perhaps take a shower with your eyes closed. So you're doing something just a little differently, and it means you're relying on senses you're not in the habit of using. Brush your teeth with the opposite hand to usual. If you drive to the same place every day, try and find a new route. Regularly speak to people you don't know. You know, we underestimate just how much it engages our brain whenever we meet a new person. Find a new word in the dictionary at the start of each week and weave it into your conversations. Even just listening to music that's different to what you're in the habit of listening to will have the effect of boosting your brain. Now, if you're super time poor, you can do all this in one hit. Here's how. Find someone you've never met before. Take them home with you via a new route. Invite them to have a shower with you. With your eyes closed, so it's fine. Use your new word in conversation with them and have weird music playing in the background. Your brain will love it. And look, if you get out of your comfort zone, anything is possible. Watch the fish. Whee! Okay, the final 5 brain boosters are really just a checklist, and the first one is get a regular good night's sleep. When we're sleep deprived, it significantly erodes our immune system, our brain function, our decision-making capacity, and our empathy. After 17 hours of wakefulness, the brain operates as though we had a blood alcohol reading of 0.05%. That's above the legal limit for driving. There was a frightening newspaper article in Brisbane last year. There had been a big event. There were a whole lot of police recruited to help at that event, and one young policeman was then charged with carrying a bag of guns back to the police station. And he was catching the train to do so. And when he arrived back at the police station, guess what? He'd left the guns on the train. He'd forgotten. He was hauled over the coals. How could you do something so stupid? How could you leave a bag of guns on the train? Now, fortunately, an honest passenger had taken them back to the police station, but the answer was the poor young man was just really badly sleep deprived. 10 days, 12-hour shifts, no break. We do really dumb things when we're tired. So it's really important to take care of ourselves on that level. Now, the next brain booster is going to sound like a contradiction. All morning I've been saying, get out there, get adventurous, get stimulated, and now I'm going to tell you to get still. Stilling the mind is as powerful and important as stimulating the mind. What do I mean by stilling the mind? Formal meditation is one way, but anything that presses the pause button on your mind chatter, that quietens down your thinking. You know what I mean by mind chatter? It's that little voice that starts talking the moment you wake up and doesn't stop till you go to sleep. It's that little voice right now that might be saying, I don't have a voice inside my head. That's the voice inside your head. We need to calm it down. So I'm going to teach you a method that takes just 1 minute. You can apply it in any circumstance that will still your mind. So can I ask you all just to take the palm of your hand and just look at the palm of your hand as though you've never seen it before. You can either look at one point or scan your whole hand. The important thing is try not to have a conversation in your head about what you're seeing. So if you've just noticed a really short lifeline, don't say to yourself, oh, I'm going to die soon. Just let that go, and I'll keep quiet while you're looking. Now close your eyes and listen to the sound of my bell. And when the sound subsides, just listen to the silence or any surrounding sounds. Keeping your eyes closed, become aware of everything your body is touching. Become aware of the clothes against your skin, the chair against your back, the shoes around your feet. Scan your body from top to toe and become aware of everything your body is touching. And finally, bring your attention to your breathing. Take a slow, deep, conscious breath all the way in. Feel your lungs expand, and slowly all the way out. Take one more slow, deep, conscious breath. And when you're ready, open your eyes. How many of you found for at least some of that time you realised you weren't thinking because you were looking or listening or feeling or breathing? Can I have a show of hands? Terrific, that's what I mean by getting still. If you interrupt your day with just a few meditative moments like that, a minute, 2 minutes, you'll actually find you have much more energy throughout the day and your brain will operate better. It's also a great way of relieving stress, because what you did was a bit like this. Imagine this bottle of water as your mind and the grains of sand as your thoughts. Now, as we go through our day, our thoughts are flying around all day, every day, and it gets so busy in our minds. And the busier it is in our minds, the more tired we feel, the more mistakes we make, and the more stressed we feel. But if you allow your thoughts to settle, as you did just then, suddenly we create some space and clarity in our minds. There's actually room for fresh ideas to pop in. We just feel calmer and more relaxed and energised. And it's also a great way of falling asleep if you struggle to fall asleep. Just run through one of those exercises as you go to bed. Okay, The final few. There was a wonderful 75-year Harvard study that looked at what factors increase our health, our happiness and our longevity the most. So they started with young Harvard University graduates, followed them for 75 years and asked them 3 questions. What do you think will make you happiest in life? What do you think will make you healthiest? And what will help you live the longest? And their answers were pretty standard. I think if I achieve my goals, make a lot of money, become a Hollywood movie star, I'll be happy. If I don't drink, don't smoke and eat well, I'll be healthy and I'll live longest. But in fact, that wasn't the answer when they followed them through life. What was the biggest predicting factor of a long, happy, healthy life? Bernard Salt mentioned it. Community, relationships. Friend power trumps willpower. The more support we have, the healthier we are. And that's the third thing that halves our lifetime risk of dementia. Friends. Friends, family, connections, feeling that we make a difference to other people. So get friendly. And that's why, because arguments actually lower our immunity. We can predict how many coughs and colds a husband and wife will get by the number of arguments they have, because it hammers our immunity. So I'm preaching to the converted. You're already doing it, but just be aware that it makes a profoundly positive difference. And also, a study found, that's why dancing is such a good brain booster, because it's social, learning new skills and physical. And you'll love this one. There's an actual study on the effect of volunteering. And people who volunteer have better brain function because volunteering actually changes the blood flow patterns in their brain and improves cognition. They actually did a study on Black American women who were showing signs of cognitive decline. They divided them into 2 groups. Control group changed nothing in their life, and the intervention group were actually given the opportunity to do some volunteer work at a local primary school. That was the only thing they did differently in their lives. 3 months later, when they tested their memory, their cognition and scanned their brains, there was no change in the control group. There was an improvement in every aspect of their mental functioning because they'd done volunteer work. And that's because there's nothing more nourishing physically, mentally, emotionally than feeling that we make a positive difference to other people, which is what you do. How good is that? Having meaning and purpose keeps us healthier than anything else. So it brings us to the final brain booster, which ties everything together. Get excited. Get enthusiastic. Do things you love. Do things you're passionate about. Because excitement isn't just a feeling, it changes our brain chemistry. We produce adrenaline and we produce acetylcholine. And these 2 chemicals help to keep our brain healthy and ward off dementia. And that's why you paid each other a compliment at the start. Because whenever we give and receive compliments, we release these same 2 chemicals. That's why you've been so switched on and sharp and will remember everything I've said this afternoon. And one final question. I started with a question, I'll end with a question. What's one thing that prolongs life by 7.5 years? I'll give you some clues. If you have normal blood pressure all your life, that'll give you 4 years. If you have a healthy diet, that'll give you another 4 years. Regular exercise, another 4 years. But one thing increases your life by 7.5 years. And it is, I think I've heard it, having a positive attitude towards aging. Continuing to set meaningful goals and focusing on what we have rather than what we don't have. Which is great news because it means you don't have to worry about all those whinges in your life because they'll be dead long before you. So, my overriding message, we are all born with a far more capable, adaptable, opportunistic brain than we ever imagined. We are not passive victims of our genes, and education is more powerful than medication. So I encourage you to get wild, to get playful, to get smart, and of course, to get my books. Thank you very much for your attention.
Helena Popovic. Thanks, Helena.
Sorry I went over.
Don't be, that's fine. Wow, get positive, people. God, I thought I was dead for a while halfway through that. How long is 30 seconds? Longer than you think. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it one more time for Helena Popovic. That was fantastic, Helena. Well done. Helena will be here all through lunch signing books. If you want to come and chat, ask them some questions. She'll be down by the side of the stage signing so you can have some communication. Ladies and gentlemen, it's lunchtime. We've got an hour and a half. Listen for the music to come back and win some prizes at 1:30. Thanks very much, everyone. Round of applause for our speakers one more time. We'll see you in an hour and a half.